Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. Welcome to those of you in the room, and welcome to those of you joining us online. A special welcome this week to those of you who have been participating in Fantasia Fair. We're glad to have you with us this morning. My name is Jennifer Shannon, and I will be your worship host today. It's great to be with you. Our minister, Reverend Kate Wilkinson, is officiating at her grandmother's memorial service in Connecticut this weekend. So we send her and her family our love and prayers. Our guest preacher this morning is Reverend Bill Clark. Familiar to so many of us, Reverend Bill has been part of the Meetinghouse community since 1989. He has served congregations in Texas, Lexington, Mass., and Martha's Vineyard. He lives here in Provincetown, and he serves on the pastoral care team here at the Meetinghouse. Welcome and thank you, Bill. Before we begin our service, I have a few announcements to share. Thank you all of you who participated in Talk Soup last week. It was a great discussion. With support from your feedback, the board has now voted to lift the vaccination requirement for in-person attendance at Sunday services. And coming in November, we'll be making some shifts to our music protocols as well. Thank you all for your thoughtfulness and care as we navigate these decisions. We remind all members that pledge sheets for 2023 are available downstairs on the welcome table and also online at uumh.org. Submitting your financial promise for next year allows us to create our 2023 budget, so thank you. One of our ministries to the homeless folks in our community these last few years has been to give out cold weather sleeping bags. Many people have taken us up on this resource. As the weather begins to turn, we have just 2 sleeping bags left. So if anyone is able to donate a sleeping bag or 2, we would be grateful. We also welcome continued donations to our Little Free Pantry. Due to the bad weather, we will not be having an in-person coffee hour this morning, but we will have our online coffee hour Tuesday evening at 5 p.m., so we hope you can join us then. Let us know if you need that link. Let's take a moment now to affirm our Meetinghouse covenant. I will say a line, and then you may say it back to me. Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
Love is the spirit of this Meetinghouse.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace. To seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now is the time to light our chalice. And as we light our chalice here in the sanctuary, I invite those of you at home to light a candle from wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected, even while we're apart. This chalice lighting today is by Marjorie Montgomery. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Please join us now in a spirit of meditation and prayer. If you have a joy or a sorrow on your heart this morning, you're welcome to light a silent candle during the prayer or at any time at the service table at the right of the pulpit. There's also a journal there for you to record your thoughts and prayers.
Good morning. Before we pray together, I just want to say it's wonderful to be back here with all of you, and this is my church community, so it's good to be here with all of you. Our prayer this morning is not the one I submitted to Kenneth to print out, so it's a different prayer, and I hope you can follow along. My friends, we are human beings. We are human beings connected to one another in this mysterious and wondrous journey that we call life. Events may happen to our lives that fill us with great joy and celebration. Events may happen in our lives that fill us with great sorrow and sadness. Events may happen in our lives that fill us with deep concern and confusion. We may not always understand our thoughts and feelings. We may not always understand why any of these things are happening in our lives. But we gather on Sundays as a human family to acknowledge them, to share them, and to remind ourselves and one another that whatever we're going through in this life, my friends, we are not going through it alone. It is our being together, sharing together, listening and loving together that hope and possibility arises. May we always continue to live, to act, and to relate to one another from this place of hope and unimagined possibilities. Hope arouses as nothing else can arouse, a passion for the possible. Let us take some silence together. You can think of the prayers in your heart.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice.
Thank you, Diane. This morning's reading is A Tale of Truth and Wisdom by the infamous author Anonymous. Truth came to town one fine day. She had a thing or two to tell. She meant well, she truly did. Helping people through telling, it was what she was all about. So she swept into town square, her rags and tatters swirling, barely covering her nakedness. "People!" she called. Her voice was not pretty. It held the effort and strain of every discovery. Her body bore the bruises and scars from every collision of hope with reality. Still, she had a certain strength that was easy to see, but it was barely covered by the shredded rags of what was once a dress. "People, hear me!" she cried. The people moved. Yes, they moved fast. They took but one look, and children ran to their mothers' skirts. Fathers picked up babies. Old ones shooed in young ones, and young ones scooted in old ones. Truth stood alone in the center of the square, tasting the dust of people's departure. "It's just another hard thing," she told herself as she stumbled across the bridge out of town. "And I must face it," she said out loud, but started to choke on her own sorrow. She steadied herself on the rail of the bridge and wailed, "But they need to know."
Which is how wisdom found her that day. Yes, wisdom was out walking that day. We don't see much of her anymore. But she was out this day, and it was she who found truth, bawling her eyes out. Now, wisdom was very old, and her beauty was something you felt rather than saw. She had eyes that were ageless and a smile that warmed you deeper than your bones. Need to know what? Her gentle voice had warmth in it too.
"About the truth, life and death, love and hate and war and peace." Truth looked up as she took in a ragged breath. "I have to face it. No one wants to know." She stumbled on her words and sobbed again.
Now, now, honey," wisdom patted Truth's shoulder softly. "I suppose you know this already, but to say it true, you look like something a cat drug in."
Truth looked down at her clothes and then pushed her wild hair back, and from her tear and dirt-streaked face, "It's true," she said, and she hung her head.
"Why don't you come with me now, child?" At wisdom's tender invitation, Truth turned and followed in wisdom's path. We always need to remember that beauty is every bit as true as death, hate, and war. Wisdom bustled around her cabin as she spoke, preparing a warm bath for Truth. And just as much a part of life, even I can forget sometimes. Now you pay attention, and I'll teach you a few things. First, wisdom trained Truth's voice. She taught her the sounds of waterfalls, the morning song of birds, and the happy gurgle of babies. Then she wove Truth a skirt made from the color of sunsets, the hues of spring flowers, and shiny pebbles on the shore. Wisdom fashioned a blouse using the design of seashells, birds' feathers, and the leaves of trees. A shawl was made from special cloth that had the depth of the ocean, the intensity of the sky on a summer night, and the majesty of a mountain. Wisdom dressed truth with pleasure, but truth squirmed in the new clothes. Well, Wisdom asked.
But I am hidden.
Whew! Wisdom gave a laugh that was more a hoot.
Am I hidden?
Wisdom chuckled and shook her head. No, you are not. Let me tell you one last thing. And she leaned in to whisper in Truth's ear.
Truth smiled a smile that grew larger with each step towards town. Once again, Truth walked over that same bridge and swept right into that town. Children followed her, mothers turned and smiled, and fathers stopped to listen. As she sat down in the square, she called in a large and joyful voice. Story! I'm Story! Come and hear me! The whole town gathered round her, and they listened, and they heard truth. Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection, we welcome your donations here in the sanctuary or online through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website through uumh.org. And on and off-site, your offerings will now be gratefully received.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
Thank you so much, Diane. Story. I am story. We Unitarian Universalists honor and hold up stories all the time, be them biblical, secular, political. Stories may be considered our sacred scriptures. Well, I have a story I want to tell, to share with you. It's a true story, that's for certain. This story happened to me about 4 months ago. I had a stroke. It was considered a mild stroke, but a stroke nonetheless. I was up in Maine. I went to Maine, staying at the house my parents left us in the village of Cape Porpoise, outside of Kennebunkport. I wanted to get off the Cape because I hadn't been off the Cape before summer started. I had a job to report to on Friday, and I was just tired of being on the Cape. I wanted to go over the bridge. So I drove the 4 hours with no problems. Once I arrived, in my attempts to get the key for the house, which is we always hid it under our deck, I fell down. In my attempts to get up, I struggled a bit, but managed to get myself into the house. I noted that how hard it was, becoming rather awkward and difficult for me to walk. Think perhaps it was a side effect from some new medication I was on for diabetes. I managed it all right, but I decided not to go out at all, take a walk down to the lighthouse and walk on the beach. After spending a restless night, I woke and not feeling so great, I decided to drive home. So I loaded my car once again and began the 4 and 4.5 hour drive back to Provincetown. By some absolute miracle, I made it without any incident until I attempted to turn into the road that leads to my condo parking lot when I overshot the driveway. In my attempts to straighten out the car, instead of hitting the brakes, I hit the gas, and I drove right into a large bush and shrubs. To correct my mistake, I again hit the gas instead of the brake and went more further into the bushes. I believe this is when the stroke occurred. I couldn't feel my right foot at all. I parked my severely damaged car, and trying to get out of the car, I fell twice again. Once upright, and my bags in hand, I proceeded to my front door. In attempting to unlock the door, I fell 2 more times, damaging my glasses and severely cutting my leg. I could not get back up. I called a dear friend for help. When she arrived, she confirmed my deepest concern. She had a medical background, so she looked at me and said, "Bill, I think you're having a stroke." But then my speech was a bit slurred. And the right side of my face was drooping. The ambulance was called, and I went off to Cape Cod Hospital. The ambulance always gets lost coming to my condo. I just wanted to articulate that. The MRI confirmed a stroke in the pons of my brain. Does anybody know where the pons are? Yes, right back there. Exactly. Good for you. After I spent the night in the emergency room, they didn't have a bed for me, and the emergency room beds are very uncomfortable, and finally a bed was found. After 5 days at Cape Cod Hospital, and after much negotiations, I was transferred to Spalding Rehab Hospital for a 2-week stay. Now the rehabilitation process begins. Physical, occupational, and speech therapy sessions trained the damaged part of my brain to write more legibly, to speak articulating mindfully, and to learn the fine art of walking. I was discharged on May 22nd under the visiting nurse's auspice and attending off-site rehabilitation in Spalding in New Orleans. The rehabilitation is certainly ongoing. This is my story, and I'm sticking to it. Not one of my most proudest moments, that is for sure. Yet I came face to face with one of my greatest fears, having a stroke. My mother had a stroke and was in a wheelchair for her last 8 years. As she described it, I lay down to take a nap, and only half of me woke up. Her father was in a wheelchair for 25 years, following a massive stroke. My mother's 2 brothers are also victims of strokes. So genetics and hereditary was against me. I find the most challenging aspects to my rehabilitation was developing a sure sense of balance once again. I was totally and completely off balance. My rehabilitation began in a wheelchair. There was also an alarm on the bed, hospital bed, so if I tried to get out of bed myself, it went off very, very loudly. Even sudden moves, if I rolled over or something or adjusted my sheets, the alarm would go off. It reminded me was I was in a hospital for my heart surgery. I was hooked up to all kinds of monitors, read at the nurses' stations. When I finally started to relax and accept my final diagnosis of heart surgery, I began to meditate in my hospital bed. Once I began, a nurse came rushing in to me. Mr. Clark, are you all right? Oh, yes, I'm fine. I'm just laying here meditating. Oh, no, please don't do that on a cardiac care ward. It makes us very nervous. So much for that. But the underlying concern was care for the patient, be it from heart surgery or a stroke. I received physical, occupational, and speech therapy. My speech was a bit slurred, and the right side of my face drooped slightly. We practiced intentional speaking and over-articulating my words. Things improved greatly. My least favorite activities in speech therapy were some of the mind games we played on a computer. She was testing my cognitive skills. We alphabetized capital words and small letter words. We did math problems and map reading. I told my therapist I never do math in public, especially when it comes to word problems. I could not do word problems in math before the stroke. These were not skills in my repertoire. We had a good laugh over that, and she stopped giving me word problems. In occupational therapy, it was hard to hand coordination by using my right hand. The stroke affected my right side. We practiced separating the daily meds into containers. Plus, as a former sign language interpreter, seeing if my hands could actually make the motions again. It was all good practice for me. Initially, some of my fingers wouldn't cooperate with me, yet finally they improved over time. The hardest was a W, this is a W, because this finger just would not stand up the way I want. It was kind of like this, or a W. It was kind of like that. It looked like a V. But it's getting better. You know, we practice on a piano, playing the scales. Not that I play the piano, mind you, but just getting the fingers to move as I want them to move. Still, it was the physical therapy which remained the most challenging. Being able to stand by myself, to dress myself, to put socks on by myself, impossible. To bend down to pick up objects off the floor remained nearly an impossible task. The ultimate challenge, I said, was finding a balance. You know, we often hear the word balance as a metaphor, as in, I need to work out a balance between my home life and my work life. Or keeping a balance in our relationship with family and friends, colleagues. Finding balance can be a life's work. Or something we hear a lot about these days is screen time. Balancing screen time with actual one-on-one conversations with actual people. My cell phone now tells me when my screen time is down and how to improve it. Then there is a more functional idea to balance, as in mathematics, working with numbers, as in balancing one's checkbook or count numbers. Does anyone still balance the checkbooks? Oh, damn. All right. I remember when I asked my family, my siblings that question, they all raised their hand and looked at me. My hand was not raised. As a minister, we often get copies of church balance sheets, sheets full of numbers explaining us the facts about our spending and our incomes. Many times a minister has to receive a tutorial for a better understanding about spreadsheets and balance sheets. Again, it was not one of the strengths in my repertoire. But the kind of balance I was struggling with was much more of a practical kind of balance. Simple standing on my own. Simply walking on my own. Simply walking on my own and then turning one's head to the right or to the left or up and down. Continually moving one's arms as one's walk. We do that all the time. I remember sitting on my deck and watching people walk by, and it was like, wow, their arms are really going. They're really moving. And I was so nervous and so stiff that I forgot to move my arms. My therapist would keep shouting gently, "Move your arms, Bill. Move your arms. Keep them moving. Keep them moving." I never realized how much work it took to the simple art of walking. How much of your brain is filtering through all the outside stimuli coming in through your senses. I remember I experienced this firsthand as I tried to walk with a walker by then, and a nurse by my side. I walked out my simple driveway and onto Provincetown Road. My goal was to walk on Provincetown Road. This is late May. So the cars, the bicycles, the pedicabs, the scooters, dog walking, everything, all of that became too overwhelming for me. And I turned around and came home. There was too much stimuli coming in through my senses. After much practice, I eventually accomplished this task on my own. My next goal was to walk, with a cane now, to the breakwater at a high tide down by the Provincetown Inn to swim again. I love swimming as a form of exercise. I realized this simple task involved many stages. First, I had to get myself there on my own. Next, I had to navigate walking on the bits of sand with a cane. Walking on loose sand is very difficult. Then standing on my own and stripping down to my bathing suit. And finally, walking into the water without a cane, and then swimming. When you broke it down, there was a lot of integral parts along the way. And I practiced each one, and I'd turn around and come back. I practiced walking on the sand, I'd turn around and come back. I practiced walking on the sand, stripping down my bathing suit, then came back, or practicing walking into the water. People always asked if I wanted assistance. God bless them, and I said, no, thank you. But I could do it. I could swim. My right arm and leg were a bit weak, but by God, I could swim. And I felt great about that. My goals were adjusted to fit my progress. Rather than to water, I walked to the Red Inn, next to Land's End Inn, going up Commercial Street. Next, further down the hill to Atwood Lane, one of my favorite dirt roads in Provincetown. Next, back up to Bradford Street and down by my condo unit. One day, I actually walked all the way to the post office. I was thrilled, but I was exhausted. Health expert and Instagram guru Jane Kingsford wrote, "Balance is not something you find. It is something you create." Balance is not something you find, but it is something you create. As a health expert, creating balance seems a great goal. And this is totally what I was trying to accomplish. To create balance. It didn't come natural to me anymore. Just the opposite. I was continually off balance. Creating balance then becomes an intentional and deliberate, training the connections to my brain which were damaged due to the stroke. Much of this creating balance takes time, and it creates patience. If there was one thing this stroke has taught me, it is patience and an overall sense of gratitude for my family and my friends. I could not have gotten through this ordeal without a community of friends. For driving me to doctor's appointments because I wasn't allowed to drive anymore. Hello, good thing. My friends were so relieved to hear that. Food shopping, and most importantly, keeping me laughing and not taking myself or my disability too seriously. Author William Ward said, "A well-developed sense of humor is the pole that adds balance to your step as you walk the tightrope of life." Beautiful, beautiful. Never was the truth expressed with more accurate wisdom. In hindsight, there was much to be grateful for. I made it back from Maine without incidents or an accident until I was home in my own driveway. Surely I was not alone in that long drive home. Something or someone was looking out for me. At first, I remember being so angry at myself that I made it all the way home and then had this accident. I don't understand it, but I am extremely grateful I did so safely. I recall once in the hospital, the doctors would, was always in my chart. He drove home from Maine, he had a stroke, and every doctor I saw questioned me, like, you got in the car? And you drove 4.5 hours through Boston? Why, they would ask. Why did you do that? And I said, well, I want to be home. And I want it to be in my own house where my community is. And the doctors who know me. This one doctor looked right at me and said, I don't know you from Adam. Cheeky son of a gun. Yet, he did have a valid point. My recovery continues as I learn the task of keeping my balance and filtering out the added stimuli as I proceed forward. I did perform a wedding in September. It was a small wedding for 2 local summer workers. I managed it okay. But I did find standing on my own, reading my prepared script, engaging the couple in conversation, speaking to the guests, all involved, was a bit challenging. I remember grasping for the wall as I was about to lose my balance. Yet I did it. I did it. A slow entry into the profession that I love. And truth be told, that I can stand on my own here and preach to all of you once again is totally new for me. As a friend said to me, Bill, you seem to have 9 lives. You survived open heart surgery, survived diabetes, and now you survived a stroke. I get the feeling it's not your time yet. And thank goodness for that. Because I'm not ready to give this all up. I recall my ministerial mentor, the Reverend Peter Fleck, used to say, and it was written in our orders of service when we had them, said, this is a day that has been given to us. Let us be glad and rejoice in this day. All I have to say is I am rejoicing, my friends. I am totally and thoroughly rejoicing. Amen. And blessed be. They ever had a standing ovation? It's great. I'm sorry? I know, thank you. Oh, goodness, pardon me. But it's our tradition here at the Meetinghouse to propose a question for our Zoom coffee hour on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Contact Kenneth, you will need the connection or the link. And here is the question. When have you felt off balance? When have you felt off balance? And what brought you back? And what brought you back? Amen. And blessed be. Thank you all.